Hello and welcome Art Base supporters. My name is Lissa Ballinger and I'm the curator here at the Art Base, and I have the pleasure of being here with Marcia Weese, and Marcia Weese is our current exhibition on view opening March 19th, Friday, March 19th through April 16th, and we hope you all are able to come here in person. Our gallery hours are Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. and of course by appointment also. This exhibition is entitled Above Below, and we'll get into that title in a few minutes, but I just wanted to introduce Marcia and myself and enjoy. I'm going to step out of the camera right now so we can unmask and move forward. Okay, Marcia, thank you so much for being here. And the first thing I'd like you to do is sort of describe what our viewers are going to see when they come and visit this exhibition in person. So what is behind you?
Well, I have 28 monotypes of 3 different printing processes. These are the actual monoprints. I was supposed to have this show last year, but I also have a whole wall of new work because I wanted to keep it fresh and new and real for me. The title of the show for me is very important conceptually. Above, below. So this means a lot of different things to different people. But for me, there are 2 realms here that I'm investigating. Above is what we think we see. It's you could say masculine, below feminine, above outer, below inner. There's some poetics here that I'm working with, and in this, all of these images are diptychs, so they're 2-part, either side by side or above, below, and sometimes I'm flipping them so that the viewer can take a look and think about it, and it's an installation in my mind. So all the pieces work together. The different processes I could talk about.
Well, let's back up a little bit, because I think actually one of the things that I found so interesting about this work, and you sort of briefly mentioned, is that it's 3 different printing processes. So let's go back and sort of talk about those 3 printing processes and about the different papers you're using, because one of the things that's so alluring about the pieces is not only the strong horizon line, but like you said, that these are different images altogether that you have then put together. So some viewers might not understand what a diptych is. It's 2 different pieces put together. So for instance, the piece right behind Marcia, which is the whale piece with that dark, really brilliant red above and then the whale below. Let's talk about the process of that piece.
Okay, so that is a monotype.
And tell us what a monotype is.
Monotype is a one-of-a-kind print that gets rolled through the press. I can't make 2 the same, even if I use the same stencils, which is what I really like about it. It's spontaneous, it's not a multiple. I feel like there's just too much in the world anyway. I mean, why do I have to make 25 of these? I would much rather make
pieces.
They're all unique.
Even though they're prints, they're all unique.
Right, and that's what the mono means, which is one of a kind. And I love working with Okawara rice paper because it absorbs the pigment really beautifully. So and this is called a bleed print, where I print right to the edge. So I make these images. I work with nature as my muse. I find tremendous inspiration from the natural world, which in my mind knows all. And they're iconographic, and they're sort of totemic, because I do have a sculpture background, and I like that singular image, which catches you. So I'm rolling up these various images, and then they're sized, so I know that they're equal sizes. Then I put them together like collages. So I mix and match in my studio, which is also for me a bit like making sculpture. So I found the red working with the blue whale, and there are all sorts of interpretations here. We don't have to go into all of them, but I in each one of these, the rice paper print gets tacked to a bigger piece of print paper. For instance, Arches. Mostly I work with Arches because I like the warmth and color. So yes, there's a certain amount of assembly going on here as well.
So let's go back. You mentioned that you were trained in sculpture, and let's go back to sort of your beginnings in the art world. And you've had a really, I think, extraordinary rearing growing up. And if you could speak a little bit about your parents and growing up and then coming to Aspen, because your history with Aspen is also really interesting.
So yes, I grew up in Chicago. My father was an architect. My mother was a designer. And they were great friends with the Pepkes, the Berkos. They met Franz Berko. It's a wonderful Aspen family here. When he was teaching at IIT back in Chicago in the 40s.
And IIT is the
Illinois Institute of Design.
Technology. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're right. Illinois Institute of Technology. It was the Chicago Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was moved when it was kicked out of Weimar, Germany, during Hitler's time, and they moved to Chicago, and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy was running it. And these were great friends of my parents. So I grew up in the middle of mid-century modern. And my father came out after the war, they drove from he got off of his ship, and they drove east back to Chicago through Aspen in 1945. And he fell in love with Aspen. He took these wonderful black and white photographs of downtown, which is unrecognizable now, of course.
Do you still have these?
Yes, somewhere.
Treasures, you have to dig them out.
I have to go to that storage unit. Anyway, so he loved to ski. So every year, even before I was born, they started coming out at Christmas, and they would rent the southeastern corner of second floor room of hotel, little suite at the Hotel Jerome. So I was born in the early 50s, and I learned to ski on Ajax. And so that became our family tradition. We came out every Christmas for 2 weeks, and made these wonderful friends of locals, really. And by then the Berkos had moved here, and the Benedicts and the Byers, and that whole Aspen Institute group was part of my upbringing. And I liken those early days of Aspen to being as a child, it was like being in a snow globe. It was, coming from the black snow in Chicago and coming into this white fairyland. It was so beautiful. So, and also growing up with artistic parents, for me, aesthetic it's in my DNA. So I went east to college, and I've been making art ever since. And for me, it's really, it's my compass. It's my North Star.
How did you transition from sculpture to prints? How did that?
So I had been doing a lot of site-specific sculpture in Chicago, and I was working with the prairie and limestone, which lies underneath the prairie, and text about the pioneers crossing the prairies way back when, in their covered wagons. And we moved to, my former husband and I and my son moved to New Mexico. We moved we bought a little farm north of Santa Fe. And the site was too big. I mean, New Mexico was all about the horizon line and light. And I realized I could no longer work with the site per se. Didn't have the budget, didn't have the money, didn't have the scale was way too large. So I was so struck by the light in New Mexico, and I think, and out here as well in Colorado, but I believe it has drawn all those years, many artists to that place because of the quality of light. So I began to work going from large-scale, site-specific sculpture to small, intimate works on paper. And it was a fantastic 180.
Yeah.
And it worked beautifully. So then luminosity became my focus. How to get what is on paper to glow, to have this inner life that glows and reflects back to the viewer. And this is what I've been working on for many years, the luminous. So.
And then you moved from Santa Fe. Was that a direct move to Carbondale, or were there other places in between?
I went back to Chicago for a while and to be with my mother at the end of her life. And then I really missed the stars. And the sky at night in Chicago was
and the
pink.
white snow rather than the black snow, as you spoke about.
Nighttime in Chicago, if you look at the sky, it was pink.
Yeah.
So I thought, I've got to get closer to nature. This is where my heart is. And I came back to Carbondale and built a house and loving it.
And that was about 10 years ago. So you mentioned this at the beginning of our talk, but this has really been the most extraordinary year for everyone. But you were at sort of the height for the art base and your relationship with the art base. Your exhibition was supposed to actually be exhibited last year at this time. And we canceled it, or we postponed it, I should say. We postponed it, and a year later, here we are. And it's been a really amazing process for me to go through with you, just thinking about everything that has happened in the last year. But also seeing you did a whole new body of work that is included in this during this time. And I'd love for you to talk about that particular body of work, how it changed all, how that happened in the middle of a pandemic, and also speak specifically to the different subjects in your work in this exhibition. So whales and trees and dragonfly maps and Mount Fuji, please.
Right. So we all remember this time last year across the world when the pandemic struck, really. It struck me. And I was like a deer in headlights. I was frightened. I was never been through anything like this. I was standing in my studio wondering how in the world what can I say? Where do I start? And a couple things happened. I was rummaging through some old images looking for some kind of message, and I found a photograph I'd taken a couple years ago of a beautiful dragonfly that had come into my studio. And I started researching dragonfly, and across many cultures across the world, except for our culture, the dragonfly symbolizes joy, happiness, travel, rebirth, all the things I was looking for was, okay, I need regeneration. So I made a solar plate etching of the photograph, knowing that at some point I could incorporate this in some prints. At the same time, I came across an amazing, for me, amazing process I'd never heard of called sumi nagashi, which is sumi ink nagashi. It is an ancient Japanese paper marbling technique, which I could do in my studio very easily, very inexpensively. I needed 2 brushes, a shallow pan of water, some sumi ink, some soapy water on the other brush, and I generated a pile of very delicate wood-grained pieces of paper that I knew I would be able to incorporate. So suddenly I had regeneration, I had this layering of potential translucency with these wood marbling techniques, and I was off and running. So one of these walls, and I call them dragonfly maps because some of them, what I'm trying to do here is talk about where the dragonfly is going, where the dragonfly's been. Often the texture in the piece could be made from the dragonfly wing. It's all very integrated. So that's what happened this past year, and I was happy to be able to understand that even though I was in this very stressful place, as many of us were, all of us probably, that I was able to call upon my creative self and work with it and work through it. I also was on another wall. We have Mount Fuji studies, and those are actually woodblock prints, and that's called, in the Japanese term, is moku hanga. And I was invited to Japan a few years ago. It was such a treat, such a treasure for me to study for about 5 weeks this moku hanga technique. And my room, we were in a small town about 2 hours west of Tokyo, and right outside my balcony with my tatami mats and my little cot was Mount Fuji and Mount Sopris.
Yeah. How inspiring.
It was, so I spent 5 weeks studying Mount Fuji in all of her varying states and studying this process called bokashi, which is very, very difficult, which is a shading that happens from light to dark or dark to light that the Japanese prints back then in the 1700s and all the way to today. They do this to create some sort of a depth because those prints are quite flat. So I was working with watercolor, I was carving blocks, and I have 3 of the blocks here.
It's a wonderful thing to share for people to be able to see that process. So, because a lot of people have a hard time understanding the printmaking process, and this specifically, I'm so grateful that you shared those with us. Right. Another reason to come in and see this exhibition specifically.
So then I also have a moth and moon, which you'll see on the invitation. And again, a moth flew into my studio and died on my table, and huge, almost as big as a hummingbird. And for me, the moon and the moth move together so beautifully. I also have some haikus, some haikus related to each one of these series. The tree series. So there's been a lot of talk recently about what we are discovering. I mean, scientists discovered quite a while ago, but now everybody seems to be talking about it, that trees in the above have this manifestation of leaves and twigs and bark and branches. But below, there is this communication going on through the mycelial network, which is the fungus that lives within the roots that create electrical charge, that throughout an entire forest, the forest is talking underground. And again, for me, this is, the dark feminine, the birth, the place that above often doesn't want to talk about or look at or whatever. So I have these 3 tree pieces that are speaking to that, very much above, below. And then the whales, they've recently discovered that, especially the song of the fin whale, it actually penetrates, as we know whales sing over very long distances, and some songs last for 30 minutes. The vibration of that song penetrates the ocean floor and creates a seismic map of the contours of the ocean floor. And now scientists are able to get some of that seismic information. So the whales have a 3D world that they're working with through sound. And these invisible parts, for me, again, the below, are so fascinating. We, I feel, as humans, know so little. Mm-hmm. And the natural world has it figured out over so much
and will
millennia.
Continue to teach us.
And constantly, continually teach us. So my inquiry here is to pay homage to above and below and work to integrate those 2 realms, so that to be a more whole person, really, and for all of us, we all have that. We all have those within us.
Yeah.
those dichotomies, those juxtapositions.
Well, thank you so much, Marcia. This is Marcia's inaugural exhibition at the Art Base, and we're so grateful that you're here. It really is an extraordinary exhibition. She has written blurbs about each series. It's definitely worth an experience to come to Basalt to see this exhibition. Again, we're open Tuesday through Friday, 10 to 5. The exhibition is on view through April 16th. And we hope you come visit. Thank you so much, Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you.